Hello again, everyone. Melth here with an extraordinary Advance Wars by Web game this time. Far more importantly than merely being my 10th Global League game, this is the one where I'll be unveiling a new technique for intel gathering and analysis in Fog of War, one that I've been thinking about for a long time. This has the potential to revolutionize the Fog of War mid-game, and I have never heard anybody else talk about this or even allude to the idea of it. So even if you're an expert player, I think you might well learn something from this video. For those who want to skip what the technique is, or into the game itself, I'll provide timestamps for that. My opponent this time is named Zarak, which I think is some kind of Warhammer thing, although I'm not a Warhammerer myself. And from what I've seen of Zarak's replays, quite a strong tactical player. In fact, Zarak absolutely dumpsters most players of our general ELO level when it comes to things like ambushes and formations. Tactically, he runs circles around most of his opponents, from what I have seen. So I bore that in mind throughout this match, and did not count on being able to trick him into ambushes or things like that work in other players. The map is one that is of a quite new type to me, and I have a lot of thoughts about. As you can see, it's a 2-base map. I've never played one of those before, and I knew that would change the meta in ways that I wasn't entirely sure about, but I had some thoughts on that were mostly borne out during the game. Number one, of course, it'll just tend to be a map with a much lower unit count than a 3-base map. You just don't have as many bases spamming out guys. And so every individual soldier will be more proportionally important. Furthermore, this will mean that you don't tend to really get many or any infantry walls, because you just don't tend to have many infantry in one place to make walls out of. As a next point, I think air units are more important in 2-base maps. Of course, air units are always a pretty useful addition to your army. But it's kind of a niche benefit of them in 3-base maps that when you build a lot of air units, you have a slight unit count advantage. Because every turn when you build an air unit and your opponent doesn't, you end up ahead 4 units to their 3 units. Here the ratio instead will be 3 units to 2 units, which will add up a heck of a lot faster. Furthermore, whereas most 3-base maps have a very, very natural strong side, where you'll tend to have your 2-base side just spamming out troops that overwhelm the opponent quite quickly, and allow you to then push on them, or where at the very least you can concentrate your forces and form your own strong side pretty easily. That's not really going to be the case on a 2-base map. If you have more vehicles in an area than your opponent does, it means you built fewer infantry from the nearby base, basically. And so you might be able to overwhelm your opponent's vehicles there, maybe, but you'll probably have a very hard time then having enough infantry to actually follow through and capture many things. At least relative to the way the dynamic would work on a typical 3-base map. And also, your odds are quite good that, in fact, whatever you pick as your side to concentrate your vehicles on is the same the opponent picked, and you end up with just kind of a stalemate, because it's not a natural strong side for you, which is where you chose to spend a little bit more money. So, to my mind, it seemed like keeping your smaller number of infantry alive and well positioned to do some captures will be quite key to making your actual battle victories mean anything on this map. Otherwise, you might just take out some vehicles but accomplish nothing in the long term. Moving away from the 2-base subject to the rest of the map, you can see, of course, immediately there are a ton of roads here. So I thought immediately that is going to make recons extremely potent, and it did. Recon harassment is pretty much unstoppable on this map. There's no defense against it. Sure, of course, you can build a tank, yes, but the thing is, you can recon harass anywhere on this map. You can recon harass in the bottom left corner if you're, say, player 2. Or you can recon harass the mid-right section of 3 cities the opponent would kind of trying to capture. Or in the middle. You can maybe have a tank ready to guard your infantry in one of those places, but certainly not all 3. And so, even if you have a tank, the odds are good that it'll be in the wrong spot, and your opponent's recons will go unchecked, harassing your infantry somewhere else. So, building a tank for defense is pretty much just a gamble. That made me think that Max would be better than usual here, because his recons, of course, are quite good, and also his tanks are good at instant killing enemy recons. Struck me as pretty valuable. Furthermore, there are almost no spots where artillery will be useful on this map. It's pretty much wide open. There are no choke points. There's nothing even resembling a choke point. There aren't many good spots with good terrain. There aren't many well-positioned forests. There are a couple. The 2 near the middle are good examples. An artillery there can push the enemy off of those 2 middle contested cities. That's something, sure. But that is about it, really. And with fewer units, I thought you'd probably also have a harder time making walls for your artillery. One thing they will be good at is breaking the pipe seam. This saves approximately 1 turn of time between Battlecopter, for example, being built and it actually getting into the action. So, that's substantial, but it's not absolutely crucial either. The kind of thing I would do if I had a stable situation and was going for a long game. So Max will be bad at that particular thing. Especially because, as you can see, the positioning is kind of awkward to where a Neotank or MD tank can't just swing over and break that pipe seam open without using Max Force or Max Blast. I should point out, by the way, that due to a bug, that doesn't really work in Advanced Warriors by Web anyway. Pipe seams take less damage than they're supposed to from MD tanks and Neotanks by a large amount. So even with max bonuses, you can't break them down in one shot the way you're supposed to be able to. With that one slight downside, I think Max is pretty much the best choice for this map in Tier 2. And this match is Tier 2 again, by the way. Olaf seems unimpressive, because the map has so many roads that snow won't slow the enemy down all that much, and because it's kind of a low-income, small base map, they probably won't have much value you can destroy with global damage either. Eagle seems very dangerous here too though, because air units will be good, and also it'll be very hard to break through a stall with no way to concentrate your forces very well. So, let's look at the matchup and talk strategy. So, as I've been alluding to, of course, this was a Tier 2 match, again, I think my 9th Tier 2 match out of 10 Global League games, for whatever reason, and I went with Max, and my opponent went with Eagle. So, superficially at least, that's favorable to me. The win rates on this map do indeed suggest that Max is a great pick. From what I saw, though, in most high-level games, the high-level players picked Max. But, during the time this game was ongoing, in every single high-level match where someone played Max against Eagle, Eagle won. No exceptions. So that was something that concerned me a bit going into this match, and I thought about why that would be. Now, as Max, of course, against Eagle, Max is the quintessential mid-gamer. You've got very powerful direct combat vehicles, which is basically everything. 20% bonus attack power is substantial, and quite effective CO powers and superpowers boosting your attack power further and giving you movement bonuses too, which is great for breaking walls, but as I said, there will be no walls to break on this map. So, Eagle, on the other hand, is the ultimate late gamer. Sure, his copters are pretty good day to day, and in fact, they have a net advantage when it comes to dogfights against Max's copters. But what really makes Eagle stand out, of course, is that he has the best superpower in the game. And so if Eagle's allowed to just build up his units, he will auto-win by just having a good superpower. So, normally to win as Max against Eagle, what you need to do is either just keep pushing Eagle so you get an overwhelming income advantage because he can't fight you day to day, or break his army before he gets his superpower out with a really good Max Force or Max Blast or something like that. The trouble is, on this map, neither of those things will be very easy to do. Because there aren't really very many contested cities, from what I see. Yes, the middle ones are indeed contestable. True. But most of the other ones you can see that might be on that middle line that might look contestable really aren't, from my observations. In every game that I saw, where people in the high-level games tried to fight to take the property near the mountain, it was a costly failure for the attacker. It's just too easy for the defender to bring up new vehicles and new infantry units and new air units to defend that city. And too hard for the attacker to concentrate forces there in comparison. Likewise, with this other property near the HQ, again, the defender just has too big an advantage getting their units out there fast. It's not impossible, but you need to have such a rare combination of having so many vehicles and infantry all ready to go deep in enemy lines that it pretty much just doesn't work. The comm tower is kind of another story. The comm towers are contestable in this map. They're both, if you count the scores, equidistant in terms of tank movement and in terms of airport movement, from both players. So the comm towers are quite contestable, and because they're way off to the side, the defending player probably doesn't want to have many units just sitting around there doing nothing, compared to they might have their army in the middle ready to shift over and defend the mountain city or the other city in that line much more readily. So, what do I, as Max, do if I can't really just push for a bigger and bigger income advantage? Well, I could go for, get the middle and get double comm towers, and I will in fact try to do that as part of my strategy. But really what I've got to do, somehow, is prevent Eagle from just hanging back and building up his troops. I need to grab him by the neck and punch him in the face until he stops moving. So I came up with a plan to do that, and I'll show you what it is as we get into this. So, of course, open up with infantry, nothing surprising there. Several different capture orders you can do in this map, but almost none of them really make a meaningful difference from what I've observed. Kind of a false choice, even, I might say. No capture chains to think about, nothing like that. Every city's like exactly 4 squares apart. Here, though, is where things get interesting. See, Player 1 has a heavy advantage in this map. So I knew as Player 2 I was kind of needing to fight my way out of a hole to begin with. But whenever I'm in that situation, I try to think, is there something that despite my disadvantage as Player 2, I can do better because I am Player 2? And I thought of an idea. So I get that capture, and here I don't go for the easy capture. I'm moving both these guys immediately into the middle. It's a gamble and it costs me money, but it gives me an extremely high chance to capture both middle properties, and it is almost impossible for Player 1 to stop. Out of all the possible vehicle openers that Player 1 can do, only one of them really poses a meaningful threat to this approach. And that is to get a recon and run it into the middle, of course. Even that I can counter with decent likelihood. And from what I've seen, I kind of just skimmed through every game I could find with players of our rough skill level or above. In 85% of them, Player 1 did not take the one move that would counter this strategy, so I felt pretty comfortable that I could get both middle properties like this, at least initially. Hanging on to them is another matter. Notably, my opponent is not going for early recons, which I wasn't sure whether to expect or not, really. From some of Zarek's games, he sometimes does recons, sometimes he doesn't. Recons are of course phenomenal on this map, but I think I agree with him. Against Max, I would not do recons as Eagle. The chance of getting your recon just instant killed by a Max tank for nothing is way too high. It's probably better to go with tanks and build up and concentrate tanks like I've talked about in my previous games where I was playing as Eagle. On my side, of course, recons are tempting, but for this strategy, I think I need to get a tank. It's pretty much mandatory. My build order, in fact, is pretty much determined by this idea of going for the middle first. I want to get the middle while it's possible to get it before Eagle can build up. Then I want to try to get one comm tower, deny him the other comm tower, maybe eventually get it myself, and then push for other advantage I can actually seize to force him to go and fight me instead of hiding. Anyway, a tank here will be the perfect defense for my middle captures. Even if he has a recon, I can just instant kill his recon, and he really can't stop me very well. Goes for that awkwardly placed mountain city there. There are several, as I kind of alluded to, awkwardly placed cities on this map. Which is one reason I think a T-copter will be quite good, as we'll talk about a little bit more later on. So it gets a tank over there on the right side. He was really worried, I think, about harassment on that side in particular. Although, to my mind, I'm more likely to harass on the left side and go for the comm tower denial. In fact, one reason why I decided on this mid-grabbing strategy instead of, for example, rushing a recon to his comm tower immediately, was I thought that the odds were too high of him just expecting a comm tower rush and defending against that. But this all just goes to show what I was saying about counter-recon harassment on this map being basically just luck-based. As you can see, I am now safely grabbing both mid properties and have a tank to protect myself if a recon comes out of the darkness. And so, basically, the only thing that he could possibly do to stop me would be if he had a recon here and an infantry, both in range to attack one of my guys, he could kill one of my capturing infantry and deny me vision, and then my tank would be pretty helpless. That is the one thing that counters this approach. If all he has is just like a recon with no infantry to come in and do the instant kill, then what happens is I walk my infantry one square away, I instant kill his recon with my tank, now he's down a recon, and I have one middle property and he has no middle properties. And I'm on the city, he can't follow it up with anything. That's pretty devastating. In fact, I'd probably even rather have that compared to me getting both middle properties. In any case, I do build a recon over here on the left because I can afford it, and also I knew just, unless he dropped everything to rush for that comm tower, I will beat him there. Okay, so, gets a whole bunch of captures, getting lots of income. He's ahead of me on income because I did that one little skip to get into the middle faster, but I will more than even that out. And I think that me being Max, I can afford some military delays. And just kind of hide behind my day-to-day bonus, and count on Eagle being defensive instead of pushing his luck while I am secretly weak. I agree with him, I think, concentrating his tanks in one area. Or at least I would agree with him on an ordinary 3-base map. I do feel that on this map in particular, I probably would have built that second tank over on the left side instead. Simply because he kind of already has enough infantry there. And he could use a way to protect his guys going for the comm tower, where it's quite likely they will be recon harassing him. Still, it's an okay choice at the very least. Alright, so my turn, I capture everything, and my movements here are quite carefully thought through. This recon positioning is good for watching a whole bunch of cities and moving into a good spot next turn to watch even more cities, and this infantry positioning is also ideal to protect me from a possible recon. See, if he built a recon from his left base, which is quite plausible, the most likely place he'd be moving it would be first put it onto this road, and then put it over into this missile silo, where he won't be able to see me. If I'd walked one space further, he could see me and he could come over and shoot me, and I would not want that. So that's why I did that exact positioning there. My tank does a bit of a weird loop-the-loop there. The reason for that is he could have a recon watching me from a different side, and I want to throw him off where my tank is coming from, just in case he is watching. Give him some possible bad information. Probably unnecessary, but I'll talk more about why that kind of thing can actually be helpful in a bit. And then I get the middle cities and advance my infantry. Now here I had to think very carefully about what to build. I ultimately went with a second recon. I couldn't afford to get a tank and an infantry this turn. I certainly did not want to base skip. Here's the thing though. The current problem I face is that if he does have a recon, it is now probably on the right, simply because I haven't seen it in the middle already. On the right side, I am quite vulnerable myself to being recon harassed at this point as I move forward. If I don't build a vehicle this turn, my infantry will be badly exposed to recons with no recourse and no defense, really. And then I might not get the comm tower, which would be really, really bad against Eagle, and that's part of my strategy. I need a recon so I can protect my guys going for that comm tower. Now, recons, even max recons, are not good at fighting other recons, but at least with Max going on the offensive against Eagle recons, it's good enough. It will force him back and allow me to proceed with my captures. But the other big consideration was this. If I built 2 infantry this turn instead of a recon, next turn I would have exactly 17,000 money. 17,000 is the golden number on this map, because 17,000 means a tank, a battlecopter, and an infantry. I would love that. The problem is, though, there is a substantial probability that this turn he will attack one of my middle infantry with something. If that happens, I have to pay for repairs. Then next turn I don't have 17,000, I effectively have 16,000. Meaning I can't do tank, battlecopter, infantry. I have to either base skip or not get one of those 2 very useful vehicles. In which case, this turn I have not built something to protect my infantry, and next turn I can't either, unless I skip building my battlecopter. So, whereas the maximum payoff if I just built infantry and just kind of prayed for no recon harassment and no middle attacking would be fantastic, I felt like it was smarter to go with the plan around the worst case scenario, where I have a defense on the right side, even if it's not the best defense, and I'm not at risk of being totally crippled by being hit and forced to do repairs next turn. I have another build order plan instead. So that is my long explanation for why I did that. Even though it does mean I now have only 1 tank and I'm quite vulnerable to a possible tank attack by Eagle. Alright, so Eagle gets a whole bunch of captures, moves into the comm tower, but I can be in time to stop him because he didn't rush all out for it. And begins shifting over toward the middle. Which makes sense, realizing that there are enough tanks over here to defend, and I bet the middle property's there, it makes sense to shift tanks over there and try to push me out of the middle so I don't have that permanent advantage. But my plan basically worked over there. And then recon and artillery. I assume the recon just because, either for the same reason I'm building one, just trying to defend those guys, or just because that's what Zarek has the money for. The artillery, I think, is probably mainly meant to break open this pipe chain and allow those sweet Eagle copters to come out a turn faster, which I can agree with. And of course, Eagle artillery are always good because you can use your superpower with them. Or at least they're always pretty good. On this map, again, I think artillery are not really good, but certainly Eagle can get more value out of them than most COs can on this map. So I can agree with that at the very least. Alright. So, on my turn, I'm still being very cautious, still expecting harassment that's just not coming. Here I take an attack roll, and things go very, very badly for me. This, in fact, threw a huge wrench in my plan. Just 3 consecutive 50% chance luck rolls basically went against me in a row, and that was crippling. I will say, as I've said before, that I don't really like the luck-based damage in this game. It's not so bad later on in the game, when there's so many attack rolls going on that it kind of evens things out. It can still be bad if it's the difference between like a key breakthrough and not a key breakthrough. But it's really, really bad at the beginning of the game, where every engagement can really matter a lot in terms of who can capture what and who can't. In this case, there's a good chance of me either reducing him to 4 HP, or him, even if he was still at 5 HP, reducing me only to about 8 HP. Either way, the important thing is, when his other infantry attacks me, he'll be guaranteed to be reduced down to 9 HP, instead of staying at 10. But now I know there's a chance that he'll instead be at 10 HP if he has an infantry over there, meaning my middle that I worked so hard to get is no longer really safe. So that really threw a spanner in the works. Alright, Recon moves forward where I can watch as many cities as possible, and I'm pleased to see he hasn't started on the comm tower yet, so I'm going to be able to interrupt that. My own Recon drives over to where I can protect my infantry next turn, and I have to think about what to do about this middle thing. If I drive my tank forward and reveal it, I can protect that city maybe, but I don't know if it's worth it. He could easily have 2 tanks there, and if he kills my tank, I've got no backup, and I just lose the entire middle. So I decided to do the more cautious play and just keep my tank alive and keep it hidden for now. The infantry also try to pull back and hide. I know that I am weak. I cannot afford a big fight right now. I do put it on the city, where he's less likely to have 2 tanks ready to concentrate fire and attack me, but the city where he can't easily see me, at least. And then I build a T-copter. Now, I think T-copters are excellent on this map. For one thing, with so many awkwardly placed cities, it's just good to be able to get around faster. But also, above all, I mentioned how hard it's going to be to have both infantry and a large number of vehicles in the same place at the same time. A T-copter is the solution to that problem. With a T-copter, you can get your infantry from where you have infantry and no vehicles to where you have vehicles and no infantry really fast, and just reinforce wherever you need to have those guys. When you have few infantry, be able to get them around faster I think is going to be more valuable. So this is part of my plan for how to actually, hold the territory after pushing Eagle out. And then of course I build a tank, and I build it on the left side, not the right side, because at this point I'm thinking, I can actually probably do a serious job of denying him that comm tower. A tank from here can just in 2 turns strike that comm tower, which is phenomenal. So I might well be able to prevent him from ever getting that thing if he doesn't concentrate forces there fast enough. That could be a key part of my win condition. It does mean, of course, I'm going to be left a little bit weaker in the middle for a little bit longer, but a tank built from here isn't that much slower getting into the middle. A tank built from this right side gets first into this city, and then it can get just barely onto one of these cities, true. A tank built from over here will take a turn longer, depending on where the enemy is positioned exactly, but it's not that much longer, and there are positions the enemy can take where it will arrive at the same effective time. So it wasn't as big a downside as it could be, basically, is what I was thinking. Alright, so my opponent comes in, he attacks, he gets another great luck roll, and now I'm in deep trouble. Because now, no matter what I do, he has a 10 HP infantry there, and I have no good way to interrupt that anymore. I have to actually divert an infantry that would have been doing captures, just interrupt his capture on my middle city, because I can't afford to have my only tank run in, shoot an infantry, and then get killed by his tanks. That would be fatal. So, 3 bad luck rolls in a row there. I gotta adapt to that now. So, this turn he starts on the comm tower, gets his recon to the middle where he can watch my moves. I've said that I'm not fond of building many recons as Eagle against Max, but I think at least having one on this map is a fine idea. He secures the 2 right side properties that he was so worried about having be harassed, and very intelligently, instead of trying to push for more, shifts those tanks now away from the right side into the middle. Smart Eagle playing there, and he'll build himself a 3rd tank that's trying to concentrate his forces even further. And he's got 2 tanks right now watching that one last property that he's going for there, and his artillery ready to either back them up or break the pipe. Alright, so on my turn, I do get to interrupt the comm tower as I expected. I thought about pulling my capturing infantry off to finish him off and threaten to capture his comm tower. I might have, except that I knew I had to divert one of my capturers from this side already to stop his middle capture attempt, so I was behind an infantry and money over here already. Over here I had a choice to make of where to position the recon. If I advanced the square further, I could verify whether he's captured more of these cities at the same time, which would be good for harassing them if he hasn't already got them, which is plausible. But I'd be more vulnerable to him driving up a tank and attacking me from the city, and that would just kind of ruin everything. So I decided to occupy that city instead and not run that risk. Again, I was being very conservative throughout most of this game, I would say. Planning around the worst case scenario. So here, I can't go for the capture, I must move over here just due to the interruption. That's going to hurt my economy, but there's no real way around it. Over here in Finland, there's a good likelihood I've been scouted already, I don't feel safe anymore, so I just pull back. To where I'm at least protecting the recon, and maybe if he tries to push over here, I can get him. My T-Copter I knew would be beautifully placed for this little maneuver there. Now that awkward mountain city is not so awkward anymore. And I know I can also boost 2 infantry next turn. So, when I thought about building the T-Copter instead of building a B-Copter tank infantry, this is something that I had in mind for that too, way back then. I do get my own first B-Copter. This is, though, kind of a risk that I know I'm taking. Because again, it means I will have fewer combat units in the middle for a little while here. I've really gone for an economic start rather than a military start. I built, 2 recons, I built a T-Copter, I'm building a B-Copter instead of a tank this turn. That will all be good for my economy in the long term, but it is bad for my military presence right now, and so I played accordingly. That's one reason that I played so cautiously this game. I knew I was weak at the beginning, and I played, as a person who was in a weak position, rather than risking any fight that I can't win breaking out. One other reason that I did this, by the way, is that I know there's a good chance that Eagle is building battlecopters of his own by now. And for me to build an anti-air right now, when my whole army is already weak to tanks, would be a fatally bad idea. And then of course also, I do want to be able to get some good use out of the T-Copter, and be able to replace the infantry that I had to divert on the left side, so getting more infantry on a B-Copter makes sense for those economic reasons too. So all of that was my reasoning for building a B-Copter this turn, even though I do know that compared to building a tank this turn, it leaves me vulnerable for 1 turn longer. Alright, so he completes the last of his contestable properties over there on the right side, and goes for that capture on the middle property, but he does have to pull back away from his comm tower at least. Of course, he also starts shifting tanks over there to defend it, and I was expecting that. No big surprise there. He also shifted the artillery over instead of having it shell the pipe seam. I guess realizing he had bigger priorities and wasn't really planning to build that many copters at the time being. I was, by the way, checking his pipe seam's HP every turn, because you can see that even in fog, just to make sure he wasn't already shelling it. Try to gather that intel. Does get his first B-Copter this turn, and gets that sweet infantry B-Copter tank built. So he at this stage is a much stronger military than me, and I knew that was a strong possibility, and that's why I was playing the way I was playing. But that's going to change. My economy is going to be better than his. I got the mid properties, and I'm also going to be much faster to get to the corner property. In the middle though, I am forced to painfully interrupt him with an infantry which I know is just going to die as a result. It's unfortunate, but it is necessary. I can't sacrifice a tank to do that. Now he definitely put that infantry near the city as a trap. But this is not me falling for a trap when I attack it. I thought very carefully about this and decided it was probably the best move available to me. Just standing on his comm tower to block it is not an option. His base is the perfect number of squares away, he will definitely have tanks that can hit me there. There's nowhere else I can move that lets me either harass or scout very usefully. If I attack though, not only do I get a sweet shot at that infantry, ruining his chances of getting the comm tower for a long time, but I might well also put him to a spot where he can't get both of these properties very easily. I've been counting his infantry, and I know that if he had a normal build order, he's running out of infantry at this point on this front. As it turns out, he had a weird build order and built 6 infantry and no vehicles over there, but that was highly improbable at the time I was making this judgment. So there was a reasonable chance that, besides the obvious damage I was dealing and delaying the comm tower further, I was also hurting his economy in other places too. Didn't actually turn out to be that way, but it was a reasonable guess. In the unlikely chance that he's bluffing and only has 1 tank out there, if I'm on this city, I can get myself tank back up and actually hold the city for a little while and maybe punish him. Highly improbable, but I can do it. Much more probably, he has like 2 tanks or tank and artillery over there waiting for me, but I'll at least have revealed 2 vehicles and maybe more. So, all of those reasons are why I thought it was worthwhile to do this attack, even though I knew this infantry was very definitely bait. Alright, so, get the mountain property, go for my comm tower, move to where I can back myself up there and also go for that corner property at the same time. Versatile positions. I'll be a couple turns late on getting that property, unfortunately, but the rest of my economy is doing pretty well, at least. The T-Copter is very useful here, not only boosting 1 infantry, but dropping off another where it can cost-effectively help defend the middle properties. Can't spare tanks for interrupting right now. My recon I'm being cautious with on the sea. Oh no, he already has all of these properties. Okay, so I'm not going to be able to harass any of those. At this point, that's not too surprising. It would have been a long shot, but I also see, no vehicles whatsoever here. Now, there could be one hidden in the forest or whatever, but this probably means, as I've been suspecting, that he's concentrating forces over here. So, all the more reason to play cautiously in the middle. Over here, I can both defend the middle and attack the comm tower and back up my recon. It's again a very versatile position. You can do a lot of things with it, so I can adapt to whatever my opponent happens to do. Infantry there is ready to either harass anything going for that city, or go for the comm tower. Over there, I shift away because I'm thinking, okay, no vehicles over here. I need to back myself up harder on this side, where he probably has more units coming in. My copter, again, it could have gone into the middle, but I'm trying to concentrate my forces over here and maybe make a real push for that comm tower and see if I can permanently deny it, depending on what he has and what he doesn't have. And here at long last, I have 17,000, so I can finally get myself my tank, battlecopter, infantry. The moment we've all been waiting for. So this turn is crucial. This is when the real battles begin. And I know at this point, I'm a lot weaker than he is. But I'm Max, he's Eagle. He doesn't know that I'm weaker. He is highly unlikely to push aggressively against me. So over there he just did some scouting. He does have enough guys to go for all the captures. But notice one important mistake that he's making. He should have killed my recon above all first. Instead, he's revealing a lot of stuff he doesn't need to reveal. His recon is, meanwhile, revealing a lot of my stuff, so we now both know a lot more about each other. He even knows about the T-Copter. As you'll soon see though, I'm able to do a lot more with that information. He didn't need to reveal this tank, probably. Definitely should not have revealed that artillery. And reveal the tank in the forest too. So now I know a lot more than I needed to know. If there's one thing I'm good at in this game, I think, it is squeezing every possible advantage out of every scrap of intel. I am the Sonya of Advance Wars players. Alright, so there he shifts to defend his properties. I agree with these moves, I think. From that city, he can defend that northern city quite well. He has people to defend every city, basically, for the minimum possible cost. More tanks to the middle. He does, to my surprise, have enough guys to go for all those captures, because he built nothing but infantry for 6 turns on the left side, which I did not really anticipate. Another artillery, again, to break open the pipe seam, because this guy had to redirect to defend his tanks. Another battlecopter. And built a little wall for his artillery. So, it's time for a shocking plot twist, and then the big reveal about my new technique. What you have been watching has not actually been my game against Zarak. This is, in fact, a game between 2 of my alt accounts that I created at this exact moment, the start of my turn 10, to keep track of what Zarak's moves had been and where his units could and could not be. And I don't mean that I was guessing. I mean that I knew with certainty what he had built from every single base through turn 8, where he put almost every single unit every single turn, what his capture order had been, and how much money he'd had in the bank every single turn to build with. How could that be? Well, the answer is fuel. Let's take a gander at the start of turn 10. You'll see just how close I was, and then I'll talk about how I did this analysis and how I figured out what he had to have and where. So here are how things stand at the start of turn 10 in my simulated game, and here's how they were in reality. This one infantry slightly different position, it's just a misclick. I actually knew where it was and just clicked the wrong spot in the simulation game. So the only real differences were things that I knew about. Number one, I knew that he could have either built himself a recon or an infantry last turn from his right base. I didn't know which one, would have afforded both. But I knew it would be one of those two. I decided to go for the worst case scenario for me, which is that he did not build a recon, he built an infantry. Because that would allow him to then get himself out tank copter next turn, which would be much worse. As you can see, he didn't actually do that, but I was trying to plan around the worst case possible scenario there. Also, I thought he had this infantry 1 turn further ahead. I knew that it was possible that it was back here, but it depended on what his initial capture order was in the one remaining ambiguity. I decided again to assume the worst case scenario for me. So how did I figure all of this out? Well, the answer, as I mentioned, came down to fuel. I've been gathering some intel on that going back as far as turn 7 when I first saw one of his units. Let's go back to that turn. So, On turn 7, he walks his infantry into my vision range. And that's the first bit of intel I get about what my opponent is doing. So when I saw the infantry, I saw something important, which is that it has 96 fuel. Fuel is always public knowledge in this game. Click an enemy unit, even Sonya's units, you can see what their fuel is. Every unit type has a certain max amount of fuel that it starts off with, and whenever you move, whatever your movement points spent is, you spend that much fuel. No way to reduce it whatsoever. So if you walk 3 squares as an infantry, you spend 3 fuel. If you walk a tank into a forest, that costs you 2 fuel. Infantry onto a mountain, 2 fuel, again. So several important implications there. Number 1, if you ever see a unit which has spent more fuel than any given multiple of its maximum movement points per turn, you know it has been alive at least that many turns. For example, if an infantry has 95 fuel, it must have been alive for at least 2 turns, so it can spend 4 fuel, more than they can spend in a single turn. Barring double time or something else like that, which you'll know about and can factor into your calculations. So in this case, this guy has 96 fuel. Well, that means he must have just gotten refueled by standing on a city. And he must have then walked 3 squares. But there's only one city that's 3 squares away from this guy, and of course, it's this one. So I know, of course, now that my opponent has this city, which is no big surprise. I could also go out on a limb and think there's a good chance, although not a certainty, just a good chance for now, that he had just captured that city. During the early turns in the capture phase, it's generally reasonable to assume that your opponent will be moving their infantry around pretty much full speed, just trying to capture everything. They won't sit around turn after turn, and they probably won't retread the exact same ground with new infantry. There can be exceptions, but that will typically be the case during the capture phase. So I thought, there is a good chance that he just captured that city. If he just captured that city, he did it on his turn 6, meaning he started it on his turn 5, meaning he walked into position to capture it on his turn 4, so he was probably hereabouts, so he was probably built on turn 3. That at least is the simplest explanation for why he captured it on this turn. Again, I didn't think at this point that this was a certainty, just the most plausible explanation of what I'm seeing. Later on I can combine this with other pieces of evidence to reach actual certainties. Speaking of which, I got more intel on the next few turns. So when he attacked with the second infantry, I saw, oh hey, he has 90 fuel. Again, infantry start off with 99 fuel, so he has spent 9 to get here. Well, what cities or other properties are 9 squares away from me that he could have come from? The most obvious one actually is just his base over here. From there he had a very natural path to walk 3, 6, 9. It's not the only possibility, but it fits the direction they came from and it makes a lot of sense. With this kind of technique, you need to remember what is a certainty versus what is just a strong possibility. If this interpretation is right, this is his day 5 infantry. So now the most likely explanation is that I'm looking at his day 3 and his day 5 infantry here. That already tells me things about his capture order. So next I see this infantry walk into range, and this guy has 90 fuel. And there are actually a couple of possibilities for this one. Several plausibly located cities are exactly 9 squares away. This one, or that one. Either way, he could have just captured it, then gotten refueled automatically, and then walked here. Timing-wise, this is almost certainly his day 2 infantry, and presumably the day 1 infantry went for whatever city this guy didn't come from. Simply based on the fact that I haven't seen it near the middle already, his day 1 infantry probably captured these cities. Now that's actually not quite right. I learned the truth before day 10. It was my best guess at this time, though. So this turn, I drove in and attacked and see, oh hey, he just finished capturing that thing. And that's interesting, that overturns the previous guess I mentioned. Because I can see this guy has 90 fuel. So he did not come from just capturing this city. He probably came 3, 6, 9 from the base, and he just finished capturing this thing and thus hasn't gotten refueled yet. So, this guy probably is indeed his day 2 infantry. The one I just spotted is almost certainly his day 4 infantry, because again, the timing is he built at day 4, walks at 5, 6, 7 starts the cap, 8 finishes the capture. So the mystery now is, where is his day 1 infantry? Why haven't I seen that so far? There are a couple of possibilities, and I'll learn the truth later on. The truth that I'll learn is that it went back to capture this mountain city and then walked north from there. Regardless, I now do know several interesting things with a certainty. One of which is, he built no vehicles on the left side through day 5. which means he must have been building vehicles on the right side instead. But I haven't seen vehicles there. So they probably moved from the right side to the middle by now. And that's one of the reasons that I pulled my tank back on this turn. I thought he probably has several tanks pointed at me and possibly has already scouted me. And I was right, of course. All this fuel reasoning saved that tank and possibly saved the middle. Anyway, this infantry with 90 fuel is my first clue about the right side capture order. He evidently just finished capturing this thing. He spent 9 fuel to get here. The only property that makes any sense at all that's 9 squares away is his base. Almost certainly this is his day 4 infantry, and he went 5, 6, 7, 8, just finished capturing. Now it might seem like I just have one isolated data point about the right side at this point. But actually, I'm now quite confident that he built himself a turn 5 and 6 tank. That may sound like a weird non sequitur, but think about it. I know he didn't build a vehicle in the first 5 turns on the left side. If he had a turn 3 right side recon, he would have used it to harass me already, and he hasn't. I'm pretty sure he didn't go for artillery because the pipe seam isn't taking any damage, which is the obvious thing to do if you had an artillery. It was technically possible they had one but just was driving it slowly into position, but almost certainly he had 2 tanks. So again, I now think he has 2 tanks, and I'm right about that. And I think he probably shifted them from the right toward the middle, and I'm right about that too. And so all of that tells me to pull my tank back out of the middle before it gets double teamed and killed. So I think you can see already the tremendous power and potential of this technique. Even if you can't get to 100% certainty about what the opponent is doing, just getting from blind guesswork to maybe knowing 70% of their moves can be hugely valuable. One minor and interesting thing you can see, by the way, is that his infantry that captured the northeastern city did not retreat quickly back toward the city to the south of it, but instead kind of detoured out into the open, I guess to guard 2 cities at once. He ultimately ended up sitting out in the open road for a while, which I really can't agree with, but it worked out okay for him. The exact specifics of which particular tiles a unit moved to along any logical path, you can't necessarily tell with this technique, but that also almost never really matters. Now on day 10, I get the last few puzzle pieces. I see these infantry over here, I know this one just finished capturing this property, and he spent 4 fuel, meaning he must have just come from this property. It's the only reasonable explanation. So, in that case, this is his day 3 infantry. He built on day 3, he walked over here on day 4, captured this 5, 6, went over here 7, captured this 8, 9. So now I know, when that guy went for that property. This is the day 3 guy. I now also know, of course, that either the day 1 or day 2 infantry went and captured the right edge properties, while of course the other one went south to capture the city and airport. The one thing that I don't know and can't actually find out this game is, did he have his day 1 guy go south and capture the city, like the equivalent of my move, or his day 2 one? This was one known ambiguity for me. I never happened to be able to see the infantry that had gone for the northern city. He was always just 1 square out of my vision range, so I couldn't prove my theories one way or the other. As it turns out, he actually delayed the airport, which is not what I would have expected for Eagle to do. But instead, he rushed to get those right side properties early for fear of harassment, I think. All of that ultimately explains that 1 infantry that was out of place on my prediction game versus the real game. I took the guess that he had gone airport first because that was worse for me. But instead he was 1 turn behind. Over here, therefore, thought that he had just barely walked out of my recon's vision range before it came by and scouted. As it turned out, he actually finished capturing it a bit ago, then just kind of dilly-dallied out in the open, which I don't really agree with, but it worked out okay for him. Ultimately, I do think that Zark actually probably made the right call with his capture order, going for the airport second, because there really was a solid chance of me trying to harass him over here as Max. And the delayed money and airport didn't slow down either his tank building or his battle copters, so it all worked out pretty smoothly. It's a totally intelligent, totally reasonable capture order as Eagle against Max. Quite smart, I would say. Alright, so then on this turn I got a bonanza of intelligence. I now find out that he had a recon, and I see that it has 63 fuel. Well, how could that be? And I know, of course, that it was not built in the first 5 turns over here, because I've already found infantry that account for all of those things. So I realized that, it is still possible that it's the day 6 recon or something like that, but it would make more sense where I saw it come from and the amount of fuel that it spent, that probably it was built on day 7, drove to here, which is the logical recon spot to drive to, then drove into the forest, and then drove out of the forest. That would fit with the time of now it's showing up, it fits with its fuel amount, and it just makes logical sense at least, and it fits together with the other puzzle pieces. Again, on their own, none of these data points are conclusive. It's how you piece them together into a greater whole that lets you decipher what the enemy plan and actions actually were. but I was now fairly confident about that at the very least. So his Day 6 infantry is the one that's going eventually for this property over here. This guy's the Day 6 infantry. And I was now fairly confident about that, seeing this guy. Probably walked 7, 8, 9, and now 10, he gets to capture that city. So I could now be quite certain how all the pieces fit together on the left side. That he built 6 days of infantry, 7 day a recon. On the 7th day of fighting, my left base made for me 1 recon roving, 6 infantry capping, and a fuel gauge my enemies see. And then Day 8, I find out he built this tank, because this tank is now going to drive into my view, and it has just enough fuel that it must have come right off that city, and so that fits together too. And these other tanks that I'm seeing must have been built on the right side and slowly driven over, which is why they have so little fuel. And in particular, this one is at 48 fuel left when it comes out of the woods, and even less when it attacks me. 48 is a number that means that he, out of his initial 70 fuel, spent 22, meaning he must have moved at least 4 times, because tanks, you can only spend 6 fuel at most per turn. So, as of now, he's moved at least 4 turns already, so he's probably built on turn 5, and then you moved 4 times, and then now here on turn 10 he's going to make his 5th move. That would fit with his general fuel amount. Now, one thing I couldn't be sure about was what his exact movement pattern had been during those 4 turns. There were several different perfectly plausible routes he could have taken that would have first gone north and then shifted over to now this forest. Which exact one he took, though, is totally irrelevant. So here he reveals that tank, and I see, oh hey, it has exactly enough fuel that it must have come off of that particular city. Given everything else that I know, it was probably just built on turn 8, drove onto that city, and then drove back off of it to attack me. The only other thing that it could be would be like a turn 7 right side tank that drove over onto that city, but I'm about to be able to rule that possibility out when I see his artillery momentarily. And it wouldn't have made a ton of sense anyway, just a possibility. Looking at the artillery and what else I know, I can be sure when it was built. Artillery started off with 50 fuel. It has spent 15. That is exactly 3 turns worth of movement for an artillery. Now, it's possible that it just moves slowly for 4 turns, but I can account for that right side base the turn before turn 7. Furthermore, I can see a logical reason for it to come over here. Built to go after the pipe seam, but then had to redirect it after he found out that I was in the middle and he wanted to push me out of there. That fits with what I just saw it do, that fits with his fuel amount, that fits with what I know the bases were doing on all the other turns, and it just makes sense as an opponent's strategy, given what my opponent probably knows about me. This also was my first clue that his build order had actually been to send his Day 1 right side infantry north rather than south, because that gives him exactly enough turn 7 money for recon artillery rather than recon tank. But that was far from conclusive, so I filed that as evidence, but didn't jump to any conclusions based on it. So, I know this is a Day 7 artillery. These are Days 5 and 6 tanks that started off on the right, drove over here to attack me. So at this point, I know basically everything that he's done. Up through turn 8. I know he built a left side tank turn 8. I don't know whether he built a right side recon or infantry. He could have done a mech, but that would be a terrible idea. I'm pretty sure he didn't do that. But yeah, at this point, I know his capture order with 1 ambiguity. I know his build order. I know where he has all his troops deployed. And I can think through what his strategy must have been and what his thought process probably is right now. He started off afraid of harassment on the right, but then he saw that I got the middle and I'm now threatening his comm tower. And he's shifting everything over there as fast as he can to protect his comm tower. The story that I can see is one of sudden nervousness about that comm tower. I think he's going to go hard to protect that corner now, to stop me from denying it to him. I also see that he's trying to play very defensively, just building up lots of tanks, not going for battlecopters. I know he has no battlecopters or anti-air until turn 9 at the earliest, and almost certainly an Eagle against Max would not build a turn 9 anti-air instead of a turn 9 battlecopter. Now, a few things I didn't know exactly, because my recon died. I didn't know whether this infantry was here or here. I was sure it'd be in one of those 2 spots tanking for the artillery. I didn't know whether this tank would be here or in that forest, either one is a plausible spot, but I knew the general location they had to be in. And so I kind of assumed the worst case scenario for my planning purposes. I also again didn't know what he built on turn 9. The most dangerous plausible option was tank battlecopter infantry if he did not build a recon the previous turn. Because he did build a recon the previous turn, he had to content himself with just battlecopter infantry. But I decided it was wise to plan around the most dangerous scenario where he does have a tank in the middle too. You can see, by the way, that his right side infantry just stays out in the open road instead of retreating back to the city. I think that's so he can cover both of those nearby cities defensively, but I think that's not worth the risk. The chance of just being blasted by a recon is way too high, especially because he already has stuff guarding the other city. So at this point, I basically am not playing in Fog of War, but my opponent still is. I know what units he has, I know pretty much where they are, I know how much money he has, I know what he's built through turn 8. Meanwhile, my opponent does not know most of those things about what I've been doing. That is a great position for me to be in. So I think, okay, well, what can I do about that? The problem is, I know I don't have the forces to fight my opponent over here. My opponent doesn't know that I don't have the forces. My opponent has to assume that because I'm max, I probably do have a scary number of units. But I know I can't fight those forces. Now, I can't allow this recon to just live in the middle. It sees, like, everything. It can harass wherever it wants to. It's seeing my T-Copter now. It can see both my tanks now. This cannot stand. But, if I just attack that thing, I'll probably lose my tanks. Because I know that my opponent has multiple tanks there and has no artillery to back himself up, and I know I have basically no backup whatsoever. I also know my plans of going for this comm tower are a complete bust. He has too many units and I can't possibly fight him. He's being smart, he's keeping all of his forces together. The comm tower is now his. The good news is I've delayed it a long time, so there'll be several turns where he doesn't get to benefit from it while I'm fighting him with me having one. Now in the middle, I'm definitely outnumbered, but because I know what my opponent has and almost exactly where it is, I can actually build some good formations that are surprisingly safe. So I thought through many possible formations here to figure out which one was the safest given what I knew and what was plausible about what I didn't know. So 3 main options. Number 1, just pull back and let the recon do whatever it wants. Not good. But that's what I have to do if I can't find a non-ruinous alternative. 2 main ways to attack. Tank on the left, tank on the top, or tank on the top, tank on the right. Tank on the right might sound insane, but it means that this tank then can't do a thing to me. And this tank, of course, can't either. But I thought the odds were way too high that he had a tank here and a copter here. In which case anything put onto that spot is a sitting duck and will get blown away. So should I move to avoid a tank that definitely exists? Or a battlecopter and tank that each probably exist? That was a tough one. I decided to do some scouting first. This recon move could work with any formation I had in mind anyway. So I don't see a tank on the city, and that's good news. It makes it more likely that a tank doesn't actually exist. But it's not conclusive, and almost certainly he has a copter out there, and I can't fight a copter right now regardless. The other thing I was checking for was the one crucial thing that could blow the formation I had in mind out of the water. Did he build a turn 9 anti-air? Almost certainly not. It would be a bizarre build order for him when he could get a copter instead. I would go so far as to call it a bad move if he had done it. And I want to emphasize, I knew he did not have enough money to get both an anti-air and a battlecopter at once. If he hadn't done that right side recon, he would have had just enough for tank battlecopter infantry, but no anti-air. So it's one or the other. So, because I was so confident that he had no anti-airs, and certain he had no battlecopters built before turn 9, I realized I could actually use a T-copter as an invincible wall. If he does not have a turn 9 anti-air, or if he built it over on this side, or if he moved it too far to the left, he has no way to counter me. Because I know the earliest he can build a battlecopter was turn 9, so the furthest it can be advanced is here, so it can't hit that city. Normal logic would tell you, put a ground unit on that city as the best walling. But here actually I realize, because of what I know, the best wall is instead a T-copter on the city, because his copter that he almost certainly has can't hit me. So now, unless he has an almost certain to not exist day 9 anti-air, this wall can't be cost-effectively breached by him anymore. His copter can't hit me. If he attacks over here, he kills an infantry, then loses a bunch of vehicles. If he attacks over here, I can now loop my left guys around and actually defend myself. So I actually do have covers now, instead of having almost no covers. If he attacks this tank from the left, I get to wallop him. It's great. So, because of my fuel information gathering, I was able to build the wall that might look weird, but that I knew would work really, really well. Shift over into the middle, because I know I need more guys if he does choose to attack. And get myself a tank and a copter. And pull back because I can't go for the comm tower anymore. I did have to base skip for this, but at this point, I need more combat power. I've sacrificed a lot of military stuff to get a great economy. Now it's time to switch gears and focus on the military and win this mid-game. Base skipping while getting an air unit doesn't really hurt my unit count anyway, and my T-copter can help make up for the infantry shortage. Now I'm hoping that Sark will attack, because I now know he can't cost-effectively win, but he doesn't necessarily know that. I've given him what I hope are tempting-looking targets. He can double-team this tank. But if he does that, his tanks are exposed to units that he doesn't actually know about. I really want this brawl to start, right now. But again, Sark is really strong tactically. He does not fall for it. He avoids my trap and just goes in force for his comm tower. Again, Sark is a very smart player, and he knows that as Eagle, all he has to do is just be defensive and hold the line. He's close to winning the game at this point, because he's gone 10 turns with no real combat happening. And he knows this turn he does not have his comm tower. It's not a great time for him to be fighting anyway. I don't get to see his exact moves this turn, but because I know what he had, and I know he didn't go into the middle, I can roughly estimate what it had to be. And I can also now tell, okay, he did not have an anti-air on turn 9, or he would have gone for this wall, probably, and attacked me from the city. So, that is great for me. But, the fact remains, and I know this, I am losing this game currently. Yeah, I'm ahead on money. Yeah, I have a comm tower and he doesn't. Doesn't matter, I'm losing this game. It is turn 11, there's not been a major fight. That is a loss for Max. Now, to some extent, this is part of my plan. I didn't want to do any fights just yet until I get more forces together, and I got the middle. But I want battles to start now. My power has now peaked and Eagles is only growing. But I also know I can't fight over here. He's too strong, he's too concentrated. He's doing exactly what I think Eagle players should do. Perhaps not coincidentally, I found out after the game Sark is a fan of my channel. That might explain why he did so many of the moves that I say Eagle should do against Max, which were quite effective. In any case, what I realized I need to do instead is scout the right side. Cool, these cities are empty. What I know is Sark is focused heavily over here. Sark is focused on getting this comm tower right now. I know that Sark has basically nothing on the right side. So what I need to do now is execute a sneaky front shift of all my guys over to the right side, leaving his entire force concentrated doing absolutely nothing. So that's what I go about doing. Now my movements here this turn are pretty crucial. I need to go undetected, as I shift all my forces from the middle over to the right. I know that force is empty, but hypothetically if a guy was there, he would have seen me go up, but he would not have seen where I went after that, left or right. Moving over to the right, now I can protect my infantry over there and just kind of watch what he's got. Again, I try to shift in a way that makes it harder to see me. He still doesn't know that I'm moving these guys in. Over there, I kill his scout, that's at 1 HP. I walk this infantry in both to maybe be able to harass his comm tower next turn, and be able to guard the flank of this city, and also just kind of suggest to him that I'm going for the comm tower, even though I'm really not. Just hide that tank and move that copter over there. I would have loved to shift the copter over here into the middle and toward the right, but I can't do it, because I know he's watching from that city, basically, and so I have no movement-efficient way to shift over that direction without being seen. One good thing again is, I know exactly how far advanced his earliest copter can be, and so I know this square that seems out in the open is totally safe. This aggressive positioning is another win for fuel logic. I don't need to be cautious because I know he can't possibly hit me with anything useful here. A great advantage that lets me keep more threats active. Normally I could not risk just having a copter sit out here in the open where it could be devastated by his own copters or anti-airs, but now it's safe. I deliberately shift this infantry where I know that he can see me from the mountain, so that he will see me walking a guy to the left. Again, faking him out, making him think I'm going to fight over the comm tower when I'm not. That guy walks in a spot where it's hard to see into the forest. Again, drive up to where I'm just at a mountain vision range and then shift over to the right. Just hide all information that can be hidden. Again, drive up out of mountain vision range and only then go over to the right. T-copter goes straight up so I can help ferry people over. I do need to guard that city. I can't have him take the middle from me. With vehicles driving onto that city, that would be bad. And use a T-copter for a bonus. And just shift copters and everything over to then grab the right side. Now, you might notice I'm building no anti-airs, which would sound pretty crazy against Eagle, and normally, yes, it would be. Normally, I'd build some anti-airs by this point. But, again, I know what he's got. I know he doesn't have many copters. He didn't start building them until turn 9 at the earliest. He might not have built them every single turn after that. So I know my copters outnumber him, and they're max copters, so that's pretty good. So it's kind of a case where, because I know that he doesn't have more copters or as many copters as I do, I can get away with just copter spamming against him instead of building anti-airs. Because even if he gets a first strike on me, I will still come out ahead overall, just having more copters than he does. Normally, of course, I build an anti-air by this point, but here, I know I don't need it. Fuel was just so crucial to the outcome of this match. Okay, so here, I successfully fool them, I get away with scot-free with this whole big shift. He got another artillery to break the pipe seam. I actually predicted this. I was pretty sure he'd either build it on turn 10 or 11, just based on how he tried to break it earlier but then had to reposition. I could imagine his frustration at that. Now here is where his choice to have his day 1 infantry not go south of the city actually comes back to bite him. Because he had his day 2 guy do that, he's actually a turn behind where I thought he would be, shifting that infantry over here to the far left to capture the comm tower. So I expected him to start the capture this turn, but he actually can't do it. Here he's going in hard, he feels confident because he's concentrated his forces. So that makes sense. Builds himself a nice little wall, and I can't really counterattack into that. If I was focusing my forces over here and I went in and tried to attack him, that would probably be a losing position for me, really. Maybe if I had all these units over here, I could make it work. But at the very least, he has a good chance of holding the line there and doing pretty well. And he saw some troops of mine hanging out in the middle and so forth, so he's pretty confident, I think, that he can get away with this. But he's fallen into my trap. He shifts everything away from the right side and builds an MD tank. Now, I love the MD tank idea. I've mentioned before that those are really, really good for Eagle against Max. Max just doesn't have a lot of options when it comes to beating Eagle's MD tanks. Most COs can counter them with artillery, but Max can't do that. You can try to counter them with battlecopters, and yeah, that can work, but it doesn't work very fast, and while you're doing it, Eagle's copters can first strike you, which is terrible. So that pretty much just forces Max to build MD tanks of his own, which is okay, but my opponent already has some artillery and other natural counters to them. I've mentioned before how powerful it is if you can force your opponent to build things that you already have counters ready for. So yeah, I definitely agree with Zark building an MD tank. That was a good choice. I'm sure that if he had known what I was doing, he would have built things on the right side instead, but I did a really good job, I think, with that deceptive maneuver where I showed one infantry moving over to the left first, and then sneaked everyone over to the right instead. So, successful counterintelligence operations on my side make him build his units in the wrong place, basically. On the right, he's being smart. He has a very cost-effective small defense, just enough to hold all 3 of his cities. That would work just fine normally. The problem is that I know that's all he has, and he doesn't know that I know that. He doesn't know that I'm already moving in on him. All his troops are hanging out trying to defend his comm tower, which I am just not trying to fight over, so his whole army is going to waste while mine is accomplishing things. Alright, so my turn, I start shifting in and I go for all 3 captures at once. As I characterized at the beginning of the game, my strategy is to grab Eagle by the neck and punch him in the face until he stops moving. Up until now, Eagle could have stalled and held back and just kept building up vehicles. Now though, capturing 3 of his properties, I've got him by the neck. He has to respond to them. He has to go into this fight. Over here I can kill off his infantry and then threaten even more captures. Suddenly half of his properties are up for grabs. Even now, I don't move any units out into the open that I don't need to. I keep everything that I can hidden, keep my powder dry, let him think this is a small scale attack until it's too late. When he moves in to interrupt my captures, then my tanks drive out and annihilate whatever he sends my way. Backup capture there, so if he kills one of these guys I can just go for another capture. Again, no need to reveal, I don't need to reveal. Keep a cost-effective defense of the middle, and keep concentrating my own forces. I do shift one more guy over there because I feel like, okay, I've got enough guys to conquer the right side at this point. I don't need more backup there. I could probably use more guys here to blunt his offensive. Here, though, I do make a big mistake. Oh, okay, not this. This is fine, yes. Definitely good idea to build B-copter, tank. Recon's a solid choice, too. To get into the middle faster, and be also ready to back me up with vision over here on the left side. It's a versatile thing to do. Because Recon over here can just drive really fast onto the left side if it needs to. But here I make a mistake. I know we just captured the city. I know he could have therefore walked to that forest, the most logical place for him to be. Stupidly try to go into that wood anyway. I wasn't thinking at that moment. I should have known he had a guy in that forest, but I messed up. What I should have done was walk onto that city, forcing him to spend vehicles dislodging me before he goes for the capture. Instead, I now have to put my vehicle on there and leave it exposed. Not good. Now on the left, I have a low HP infantry that can't escape, and I see he is a full HP guy that could capture my city in 2 turns. So I do the obvious move and just deny him my city for a turn by attacking him. And I was surprised to see when I did that he had not gone for the comm tower yet. So at this point I knew either he actually had had his day 1 infantry go north and his day 2 infantry go for the southern city, or he did the day 1 southern city and then airport and had the infantry go more toward the middle rather than the comm tower. I can't emphasize enough that it's not good to jump to conclusions doing this kind of reasoning. Pile up the evidence, see what looks most likely if you need to, but don't just make an assumption that an obvious move is the one the opponent made. So it is Zarek's turn. He now realizes that he's being duped. There's an attack going on the right side where he is not present. He doesn't know how bad it is, but luckily he was smart, had a good number of people waiting defensively just to interrupt these captures. And unfortunately, he has to fight without the comm tower for a turn. My comm tower harassment really went well. He gets a start at the capture in my city, but because I hurt him, he'll need another turn to do it. So this is not going to be an even trade on cities. So he gets to interrupt all 3 captures. I was hoping he couldn't do that, but he was decently well prepared. Well done. Now, killing off my tank here is a crucial luck roll. Because he doesn't have the comm tower, it's actually not guaranteed that 2 of his copters can kill my tank. But if I just had the infantry there, it wouldn't even have been an option to begin with, so my fault. He moves in his anti-air, but he knows, just like I always knew, that he couldn't do anything to my copter at all this turn, so he has to build a wall for his own. He's a good wall builder, he's a good tactician, as I mentioned before. He does that part of the game very, very well. Over here, though, his artillery is basically helpless. It's stuck out in the open, it can't retreat safely, and do anything useful, it can't advance safely. I think it probably should have pulled back into a forest or something. It's really not safe over there. Maybe it's meant to be bait. Could have gone for the double attack against that kind of interrupt it better, but this makes some sense too, because you see I have a backup infantry anyway. Keeping his powder dry, scouting, makes some sense. I think he needed to build a tank on the right side here, though. Building a tank on the left was a mistake. Again, he's trying to concentrate his forces, but in this circumstance, he needs more guys on the right side. So there, I would say that was a strategic mistake. Tactical good move, strategic mistake. Alright, I'm very proud of my moves and maneuvers for the next few turns. I think I handled this offensive very well, with a small number of units pushing deep into his territory. Here, both scout his base and airport and attack his infantry at the same time. I get to blow away an Eagle Recon with one of my max tanks, always fun when you can do that. And I get to wreck that infantry, so now I basically killed all the guys that were killing my harassers. And then, I thought of something interesting, which is over here, he has a great formation. I can't interrupt him over there, really, without sacrificing a copter, which is just horrible to do. But there is one way I can do this. I did some calculations and I realized I could do a really, really great move this turn. So I go for the captures, yes, of course. Kill that infantry off, and then I attack the artillery with this infantry. Because that, I know, will give me just enough CO power build-up that if I now attack onto his seemingly impenetrable left side formation, I can now get my CO power. And he is totally unprepared for this max force. So now I have just enough movement power to drive that tank in and blow him away, which lets my copter swoop in to blow away his copter and basically instant kill it. And now my infantry can swing over to the right side and interrupt his capture too. So now I'm going to get 3 of his properties, and he's not going to get any of mine for at least one whole other turn. I realize the fight is on for the left, so shift the recon over in that direction instead of into the middle. Back on the right side, I can strike his MD tank with 2 max force boosted copters. That's a heck of a lot better than 2 regular battlecopter attacks. I'm also fairly confident and correct that his anti-air is going to be over on the left side with the rest of his troops. So I feel quite good about my chances of getting away with this scot-free. Even if he has an anti-air, it's still definitely worth it. His MD tank, which would have been a major thorn in my side, is now just ruined. So this was a phenomenal max force. At this point, I have won the game. Until I make one crucial mistake, my biggest mistake of the game, putting it all in jeopardy. Here's what I should have done. T-copter, over to the right. Drop off an infantry over here. Now I capture 4 of his properties. Tank, over here, hide in the forest. As he advances, I get to wreck him with a first strike. It'll be great, and it'll blunt his offensive. Instead, I make a crucial error. I knew he had a tank over here, and I thought, wouldn't it be sweet to first strike the tank during max force? It sure would be. That's a lovely first strike, isn't it? But now he can get his superpower, and I'm in a bad position for that, where he can wipe me out over here and even strike me with units built off of his bases over here. Why did I make that mistake? Well, honestly, I did too well for my own good. His superpower was not on my radar, because when I started my turn here, he was barely at 2 stars, and the move planner can't see the enemy CO power buildup. So I thought, 2 stars. He's so far from superpower. I wasn't even imagining he could get it. I hit him so hard this turn, he got up 5 stars of damage taken. That is an amazingly good max force. But, because of that last attack, he can now just barely get his superpower. If I hadn't done that, it would have been game over. As it is, he's still in a bad position. He's behind me by 50,000. Having only 67,000 unit value is not a good position to do a lightning strike from. Even if getting to first strike me with units built off of his bases will still just even things up. He can't win with this lightning strike, but he can bring things back to at least being anyone's game. I won't even be getting any CO power buildup during all of the pummeling that I'll be taking, so basically we'll just be going back to square one. I'll have a few more cities than he will, we'll have basically equal numbers of unit value, we'll both be threatening one of each other's flanks. But I think one crucial thing helped me, which is that although Sark has played a few hundred games, this is only his 4th one ever as Eagle. And I think that kind of shows with his lightning strike tactics here. While I waited for him to make this move, I was just gritting my teeth and thinking about all the nasty lightning strikes I knew I could do in his position. I could do about 70,000 or more damage to myself pretty easily. Maybe threaten a base lock at the same time. This is not that lightning strike. These are all perfectly reasonable opening moves to build up some power and just get efficient engagements. Nothing wrong with it. Exposing that right side infantry was definitely a mistake. He should have held that guy back and kept him safe. He really needs him to recapture those cities soon. Shooting down that first copter again makes perfect sense, perfectly reasonable. But what he needs to do now is have his copter attack my copter. That will pretty much give him all the CO power buildup that he needs. It also lets him take an aggressive position to threaten my base or do other things afterward. And it keeps all his other units alive to keep scouting or pushing. But I think what was going through his mind was he only has one healthy copter in this area. He doesn't want to just have it take a bunch of damage from a max force. He also perhaps had my copter earmarked for his anti-air to take out. So instead to get enough power he has to throw almost everything else away. And B-Tank took a bit of a risk there, could have taken another scratch damage that would have been quite bad for it. But I guess he had to preempt the possible capture that infantry could do against either of the 2 nearby cities. The real reason they did it, I think, though, is just to open up a path for his tank, as you'll soon see. So yeah, he sacrifices a new built tank into a max force battlecopter just to build up his power gauge. Here he's having infantry fight without a superpower bonus, just to get more buildup. Throws away one more infantry, and now he's got it. But he had to throw away a lot of units there. And because he seemed to be in such a desperate mindset, just doing everything to get a superpower right now, he uses it immediately instead of building first. So, he gets a kill there, he gets to take out my copter with his anti-air as he'd originally intended, but if he had just used his copter for that, he could have had his anti-air take out a 3rd copter. Now he didn't know it existed, admittedly, but it was plausible at the very least. It was worth trying for, I think. He does a very smart move here and tries to base lock me, at least temporarily. But because I've been being smart and I've been building copters every single turn, that's not going to work. I can easily snake out there, kill off his copter, and proceed. And his anti-air can't do anything to me anymore. He does get to wipe out my small defensive force over there, but he had to use his lightning strike and his entire army basically to wipe out my small defensive force, while my main offensive force goes pretty much unchecked, when it could have been getting pummeled by units built right off of his bases. He could have built an anti-air from the left base and just kill the copter immediately with that. So, my turn comes around and I realize, fantastic. So this last turn was really a roller coaster. Just some great moves I was making, clinching the game, then throwing it all away with one mistake, and then thankfully, Sark did not do the lightning strike that I was picturing. So, I've definitely got a clear path toward winning here, but he is still Eagle. I can't dilly-dally. The income lead I'm going to have is not good enough. I need to push the attack with my small remaining offensive force and just clinch the game fast. And I'm quite proud of the maneuvers I made to do that and close things out. So, number 1, move over there to scout his base and scout his airport. Not only is this useful scouting, it's also really, really handy because what it does is it forces him, at a moment when he has almost no units to spare on this front, to divert a unit just to kill this 1 HP copter. He has to either send this guy back, or have this tank kill the copter. At a time when he needs to be charging them ahead to stop me over here and interrupt me. He can't do that anymore. If it leaves me unmolested over here, I can just block his airport, or just keep scouting him, or just stand in his way and block him from deploying troops out. So he's forced to waste a valuable unit's turn when he has almost no units to spare, just killing a 1 HP copter. Also, I can set it up and turn it into a trap too, as you'll soon see. So there, I don't reveal this copter. Again, I reveal nothing I don't need to reveal. I set up a very effective wall here, where I know he can't actually cost-effectively break through this, and I can just be in these pretty advanced positions. If he breaks through this with like his anti-air there, sure he can do that, but the anti-air is going to die, and his tank over here can't be my tank when he's at 7 HP. And I know where everything else that he has is. He just can't do a thing to this, so I can just advance safely and not need to worry about anything. Over here, shift over to where I can threaten this capture, and to make way for my tank to drive in, safe in the forest, and blast him away. Over here I have another very clever idea, which is, okay, I could just block his base with this recon. Just stand right in front of it. What are you going to do? If he attacks me with his tank, he will probably kill me, but not necessarily, actually, because he's only Eagle. Now, the thing is, though, I know I've taken a lot of damage attacking infantry up until this point, so I'm probably at like 91, 92 HP, so he probably will instant kill me. So for that reason, I don't just block him, because he probably can instant kill me and only be base locked for 1 turn. If I thought I was at full HP, I would have just stood in front of him and just blocked him, and he would have to waste 2 turns just killing a recon as I block his base, and that would have been fatal for him. But I do the next best thing instead. Stand over there, kill that infantry, and now I know he's got basically no units on this sector, and he can't create any really efficiently either. So I can go for this capture, I can kill off that infantry, I can kill off that infantry, I'm exposed on the road. Or am I? No, I'm not. Because this tank only sees 3 squares. He can't see me. He knows I'm there, but he can't see me. This copter can't reveal me either. This tank can't reveal me. He can't reveal me in any way. So even though I'm theoretically exposed, actually, he's blocked into his own base. He can't do a thing over here. Likewise, this tank can't scout to help his copter find my copter. So I just drive over there and know I'm 100% safe. Sure, I'm in his attack range, but I'm 100% safe. There is literally nothing he can possibly have anywhere in the map that can reveal me. Even if he builds a recon here, I know I'm safe from its vision. So, just some clever vision shenanigans here that effectively base lock him without actually base locking him. And over there, I think what I want to do now is, he's running out of steam over here. I know what he's got, I know what he doesn't have. If he pushes into me, he dies. And he probably knows that too. What he has to do instead is shift over toward the middle, capture these 2 things, and then move toward the middle, both to stop my right side force and to keep picking up valuable things so he doesn't just lose due to income. So if I build over here, though, I can pincer strike him. I can intercept them moving into the middle while hitting him from behind at the same time and swing these guys back over too and just hit him from all sides, so he can't build an effective defense against me at all. So that's what I'm going to do. And just flood out more powerful units. Copters, tanks. So on his turn, he's in a bit of a bind. Now, things could actually have been worse for him. Again, I knew exactly how much money he could possibly have in the worst case scenario, and it was this much money. I knew he was doing repairs over here. I knew he'd done some repairs on previous turns of infantry too. There were only 2 things I didn't know. Number 1, how fast did he start capturing this city? Did he get it this turn, or did he get it a day later by having waited in the woods for turn for safety's sake? I'm not sure about that. If he waited a day, I know he has less than 17,000 funds now. If he did a couple more infantry repairs, I know he has less than 17,000 funds now. If he has less than 17,000 funds, the game is over. Because what he has to build this turn to have a chance is copter tank infantry. Anything else is a fatal mistake. As it turns out, he does have enough money to build that, but there's a good chance he did not have enough money to build that, in which case he would have just had to surrender, basically. Because without that, he can't scout me over here and he keeps getting base locked. Speaking of base locking, I want to point out one more trap that is set for him over here. I mentioned that this 1 HP B copter serves multiple purposes. Not only does it scout his airport and force him to waste a crucial unit's turn just killing off a 1 HP copter, but when he does finish it off, from the obvious position that he would want to attack it from, he's now stuck on a shoal where my tank hidden in the forest can drive down and first strike him. And if, as I expect, he builds himself a tank and a copter this turn, and an infantry on that side, he is now basically pseudo-base locked on that side, unless he sends the copter over that way instead of where it needs to go. He's going to be pseudo-locked on one side or the other if he falls into that trap, basically. Over on the right side, I don't really agree with that copter attack there. I mean, he had to interrupt the capture, I suppose, but it's going to result in his one remaining copter dying. This part is smart. He does pull away from my ambushing tank, so I can't just come down and first strike him. But this means he's wasting even more of that crucial unit's time. He had to move backward that turn just to take out a 1 HPB copter, when he has almost no units left to fight on that front. Now, this city is capturable, because he can't get many troops over there in time. Over here, he scouts with a 3 HP tank. I don't agree with that, but he scouts and sees the wall is unbreakable, so he doesn't push any further, so that part at least makes sense. Here, there was no solution anymore. I gave him a situation with no winning move. The best move he could have made would actually be to walk 1 back, build a tank, and build the battlecopter, I think. Then he can get enough vision next turn to break through. That's something, at least. MD tank there, tempting, but a crucial mistake, because MD tanks have garbage vision. Right now, vision denial is killing him. This tank can't drive over there enough to scout anything useful. So I see a chance to deny him vision again. Again, he did what I thought, he shifted over to the middle, smart. Being nice and aggressive, I can agree with that. Shifting over here where he can back himself up against my copter that knows is over there. Goes for a capture, but he's not going to get away with that, and he knows it. 3 turns with me having this many units over here, I'm going to kill him. And Seiza keeps getting repairs, which is sucking a lot of money out of his economy right now. With only 17,000 money, you don't want to spend 3,200 per turn on MD tank repairs. Not where you're being strangled like this. So, my turn. I think of another clever plan. I think, okay, well, I can get a great first strike here, and I can also surround his copter. 90% chance that I can just kill it, in fact. Don't get the kill, but that's okay. The important thing is it's locked down where it can't scout anything useful over here. So I go for that capture, and now I just drive up brazenly right in front of his MD tank and just blow away this tank, and guess what? Once again, he can't see me. This guy only sees 1 square. He can't see these guys. This guy sees 3 squares. He can't see into the forest. He knows I'm there, but he can't do anything about it. Which again is why he had to build a copter here last turn. That was his only hope. The MD tank was a big mistake for that reason. But I don't think people would really have thought of this maneuver, so I don't blame him for not realizing I would do that to him. Anyway, go for a join capture there, which I know he can't stop anymore, so I will get that property from him too. Over here I scout, and I think, okay, I've got some good moves available now. I've got everything that's worth getting over here on the right side. It's time for me to shift over to the middle and kill him there. So I start doing that. Here I just know I can safely advance, I can strike down that tank, deny him vision, advance further. I knew this wood would be empty, it had to be logically empty based on what moves he'd been doing. Over here I scout again, and I know of course he has an infantry in that forest, like that was a no-brainer, that's where it would be. I'll be walking over here next, but over here I can do several useful things. And importantly, it was useful to see if is the artillery backing up this tank in a formation over here, or is it hidden here? And now I know basically by process of elimination it's going to be over here. So now I attack this. Now I'm not falling for a trap here. I know he has an anti-air there. I know he has a copter there. But I know at this point I am way ahead of him on unit value. And I'm fighting near my own bases where I have reinforcements and he doesn't. At this point, I am happy to trade him a copter for an anti-air, which is what's going to happen here. I kill a tank, he kills a copter, I kill an anti-air, I win. He does not have any units to spare, so I'm happy to just take those trades. This is bait for him, if anything, really. Over there, I think, well, he didn't take the bait over here, but I've got an even more versatile position now. Number one, I can strike an artillery from the back at this point. Like, there is no longer a way to keep it safe. I can strike him from 3 or 4 sides now, so he can't defend himself anymore. Also, I know if you build an tank over there, at most he had the money to build infantry over here. And what that means is this tank and infantry will be coming over this way next. And the next turn I can strike him with me attacking from the city against his tank, and my recon attacking over here against the infantry that have to stand there. Why will I have to stand there? Well, because I'll have this infantry capture that thing. I also get myself a T-copter and an MD tank of my own, deal with his MD tanks, and to start getting infantry around faster. My plan now actually is drive him into the middle, and then go for the comm tower next if he doesn't surrender, basically. T-copter will be great for that drone. I do have to keep this copter safe. We can back me up with max force, basically. I don't want to have 2 copters die at once. That could be a real setback. So I avoid that, keep that one safe. And over here, I go for that capture. And now again, I'm putting him in a bind. This tank can't do a thing to me because it had to drive backward, and I can easily block that road to the north anyway. The only way to interrupt is have this infantry walk over here, then climb onto the mountain next turn. But if he does that, this recon can drive over there and just shoot him. And then he's blocked, he loses the infantry, and he loses the capture. And again, having lost all his infantry on the right side means he can't capture back these properties anytime soon. Even as I retreat away from his MD tank, he still can't get anything back for a long time. Meanwhile, I will get back the things he took from me. So he is at a major and growing income disadvantage at this point, not one he can stabilize. So at this point, the game is over, but he makes a few more moves. Does take some bait there, falls into the trap I mentioned there. There are traps everywhere at this point. He does do a smart move with that MD tank, moving to a position where it can interrupt the capture or threaten my tank that's trying to sneak up on him. But that does mean leaving his entire northern force with no MD tank backup, so they're out of luck at this point. So no surprise that Zark then resigns. Well played, I will say. Made a lot of smart moves, avoided a lot of the traps that I tried to set. I will say Zark was definitely one of my tougher opponents. And lasted longer than almost all of them too. Out of curiosity, I recently took the average of how long all my games tend to last, and it's apparently about 14 turns. And that's leaving aside the ones people just surrender way too early or something. So just by the numbers, this is definitely one of the tougher ones. I think, as I said, Zark had very, very strong tactics throughout this game. This is a win partly for strategy, but above all for intelligence and counterintelligence. All this fuel logic really helped me on a whole bunch of crucial turns. And I successfully bluffed to hide my weakness at the beginning and where I was putting my strength at the middle and the end. That's what won the game. All those fancy clever maneuvers at the end, they just helped close it out a little bit earlier. By the end of this game, I knew what he had built every single turn from beginning to end. I knew where almost every single one of his units was out in the fog. It's like I wasn't playing in fog anymore. And of course, as if to illustrate the point, his units couldn't even see around their own base, just showing you how important intel and vision and using what you know can be in this game mode. That really is why I'm a fog player. I love that aspect of the game. I like gathering and analyzing intelligence, and I like misleading the opponent by hiding things from them or just showing them deceptive moves. Speaking of which, I can think of a few ways to mitigate or partially counter this sort of fuel reasoning. One thing that will help are some of those weird zigzag maneuvers that I make with my units sometimes, both to fake out my true direction, and also because it uses up fuel. Done with the right calculations, you might be able to give your opponent convincing but false evidence about where you truly came from and what you're truly trying to do. During the Cold War, these sudden swerving maneuvers that Soviet submarines did to do counterintelligence basically, and counter anyone spying on them were called Crazy Ivans. I propose that moving your units in weird zigzags or swerves to deceive the opponent be called manic melts. Another thing you can do is try to stop on cities more often. Then your opponent, when he sees you, will know what city you came from maybe, but he won't necessarily know what turn you were built on, which is a much bigger risk. If you do that with several units of the same type to deceive the enemy about which one was built when, it can be kind of like people being tracked walking single file to hide their numbers. There are a few other tricks too I'll talk about in future videos. One of the biggest and most important countermeasures though is just try to avoid being scouted heavily in the first place. If your opponent is thinking things through the way I am, giving them 2 or 3 pieces of evidence might be pretty harmless, but by the time you get up to 4 or 5, they might be able to make themselves 10 more just out of what they can put together. With fuel logic, every piece of intel you can gather early poses an exponential reward for you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I think that besides being a quite fun game, that was one of my biggest contributions to strategy in quite a while. Thank you for watching, everyone, and a special thank you to my Patreon supporters: Illusory Thunder, Master Knight DH, Advance Warrior, Gregory, William Wakefield, Kenny Boggs, Danny Hall, and Jeffrey Morse. Have a great day, everyone!